Thank you very much, Brett. So tonight, dinner is now underway at the G20, capping off a day that included a bizarre moment between Putin and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and of course one of those juicy hot mic moments as well, that one including the French president. Still, it is President Trump's dinner tomorrow night with President Xi that is front and center. But as the anticipation of that meeting builds, there is another story that is gaining traction tonight in China. This photojournalist, known for capturing the darker side of communist China, has vanished for weeks. His wife now says that she believes the Chinese government is involved in
President Trump is doing deals and diplomacy, putting America
moments. Ambassador that one including the French president. Still, it is President Trump's dinner tomorrow night with President Xi that is front and center. But as the anticipation of that meeting builds, there is another.
Hi, Martha. The missing photojournalist is Lu Guang, a U.S. green card holder who splits his time between New York and Beijing. Guang has won numerous awards for capturing images that China considers, quote, sensitive, like coal miners, AIDS patients, and drug addicts, the so-called victims of China's economic rise. But now Guang's wife says he hasn't been heard from since November 3rd, when he was supposed to meet with fellow photographers in a remote province of Xinjiang, an area of China that has recently been the subject of international concern over reports that the Chinese camps there to conduct, quote, re-education of Muslim Uyghurs and other ethnic groups. An estimated 1 million Chinese Muslims have reportedly disappeared into those camps. In fact, some say it's the biggest mass internment of civilians in the world today. A former detainee told NBC it's like prison conditions with political indoctrination, including patriotic songs and lessons in Chinese loyalty. Beijing calls the camps job training centers. And human rights organizations argue that in the wake of those negative reports, the Chinese government is trying to shut down information literally off the grid and disappearing them. The Committee to Protect Journalists has now called on China's government to clarify what happened to Lu and allow him to travel freely. Last year, Lu Guang said the reality in China is that you never know if you're going to get in trouble because there are no written rules. Lu's wife, who's here in the U.S., has now set up a Twitter account to spread information about her husband's disappearance. Martha.
Trace, thank you very much. Here now, Dr. Michael Pillsbury from the Center for Chinese Strategy at the Hudson Institute. He's the author of the book, The 100-Year Marathon, China's Secret Strategy to Replace America as the Global Superpower. And Steve Hilton, host of The Next Revolution. Welcome to both of you. Dr. Pillsbury, let me start with you. Your take on this story and how similar is it to what we saw with Khashoggi?
Well, the important difference, Martha, as you know, is that Khashoggi did not have a green card. He didn't have a wife in the United States complaining. But the other really big difference is it's one thing if it's Saudi Arabia, something else again if it's the world's second largest economy. And there's still an enormous amount of goodwill toward China in our press and academic circles. So I don't expect the outcry to be as great about Mr. Lu. It should be greater, actually. But it won't be as great as with Khashoggi, who was sort of an employee of the Washington Post. This wasn't supposed to happen, Martha. As you know, 40 years ago, the great dream that a few people, Donald Trump being one, myself as another, writing books saying this would not happen. We lost. The mainstream still is pro-China. So I'm kind of pessimistic about Mr. Lu.
Yeah. You know, you think about the fact that there is a lot of backlash, Steve Hilton, about meetings with Putin or not meeting with Putin, meeting with the Crown Prince, not meeting with the Crown Prince. And yet, as Dr. Pillsbury points out, you know, nobody is saying that about China. And yet they are a huge violator of human rights. And you look at the fact that there's 1 million Chinese Muslims estimated to be in essentially what's described as work camps. And you hear not all that much about it.
Absolutely right, Martha, and it's so fantastic that you are giving this story the prominence it deserves and bringing some of these facts up, because we don't hear it enough. The truth is that the Beijing communist regime is the world's worst authoritarian dictatorship, and it is getting worse, not better. We were told a story, just as Dr. Pillsbury was saying, was that the more we engage with China, the better it gets. It's the opposite. It's got worse. There's not just those internment camps, it's the way that they imprison and torture their political dissidents, and they're now using technology to assert their authoritarianism in a really Orwellian way. They've got this social credit system which monitors the behavior of every citizen, and they get punished if they don't do the right thing. In the world today, China truly is the evil empire.
Dr. Pillsbury, you wrote a book about the motivation of China to replace the United States. It's not that they want to open relations, according to your writing, and, you know, sort of join us with this in a leadership position in the world. They want to replace us, and they do it in ways in their country that are very dissimilar to the beliefs that we have in this country. And it's a military offensive as well as a technological offensive, and, you know, imprisoning people in human rights violations.
Well, I think the reason President Trump has several times now called me the leading authority on China is he's read the book, and he had similar views way back 18 years ago in a book he wrote. But there's just been a few of us like this, Martha. The main thing is our books get mocked. I was demonized 4 years ago when the book came out. Opinion is moving closer to Steve Hilton and me and President Trump. But there's still this hardcore of supporters of China inside our system. And we have to hope that, Martha, your own coverage will help move the needle. But I remain, I think it's in doubt what's going to happen tomorrow night on Saturday, because there's so much pressure on the president from what Peter Navarro has called the global billionaires, his donors, his friends, and they're saying, stop the tariffs, this trade war won't work, somehow China will behave more rationally in the future. And this is the same thing with arresting journalists. This wasn't supposed to happen, but can we really prove that he's disappeared? He's been gone several weeks now. You know, you can see how the other side from Steve and me and President Trump, and I hope you, Martha, too, we're kind of outvoted by the billionaires.
Well, we're certainly asking questions that definitely need to be asked. A quick thought from both of you on how the president should approach this question of trade and how much hardball he can play in this meeting tomorrow night. Steve, and then Dr. Pillsbury, please.
Look, we talk about a trade war, and that's true. The trade issue is a bad one. You've got the trade deficit. Much more serious has been the persistent theft of intellectual property and abuse of the World Trade Organization rules. But you know what? This is bigger than a trade war. This is a Cold War, and we wanted to stop it from being a real war, and that means you've got to keep up the pressure.
Dr. Pillsbury, final thought.
Well, one thing the president can do is sort of pocket the very few concessions the Chinese have already made to him. They're afraid of him. They've written that he's the smartest American president in history. They have made some small offerings to him. He can thank them in some sense for that, but still go ahead with the tariffs. That's what I suspect is going to happen.
We'll watch. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Great input. Good to have you both tonight. Many thanks.
Thanks, Martha.
So Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, something of a pariah at the G20, amid accusations that he ordered the brutal murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. But he does appear to have one friend there, Vladimir Putin. This viral video of the two strong men high-fiving and yucking it up today. Neither one will be sitting down with President Trump. Putin's meeting was canceled last minute over the tensions with Russia's role in seizing Ukrainian naval ships. Here now, Rick Grinnell, U.S. Ambassador to Germany. Ambassador, good to see you tonight. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's dive right in here. What do you make of that exchange and that very sort of light, jovial moment between Putin and MBS?
Look, I think it was deliberate and very disturbing. It was clearly inappropriate but intentional, and that's what makes me uncomfortable about it. Look, we just have seen the Khashoggi murder, and we've seen the Russian aggression in the Kerch Straits, and this is activities that the international community needs to call out. And so this jovial atmosphere, I think, makes everyone very uncomfortable, but it seems very intentional, which is the disturbing part.
It's fascinating that you say that. You know, it looks somewhat spontaneous, but it's your feeling, having been through so many of these sorts of meetings and get-togethers, that there's no way something like that would be spontaneous?
I think they clearly know that they both are under scrutiny of the international community. They're in a club, one of the best clubs of the world, the most elite clubs. And these are two that are under a lot of international scrutiny, and so they're sticking together.
What about the fact that the president declined to meet with both?
I was very proud to see the president do that. When the president decides to not take a meeting, I think that sends a very strong message. He was clear on why he wasn't taking the meeting, and it's appropriate for the U.S. to take this strong position. Look, here in Germany, let me make one point clear. The Russian aggression in the Kerch Strait is a really prominent moment, maybe perhaps the most prominent moment that we've seen in this buildup of Russian malign activity. It sends a very strong message to the Europeans that they should not be doing having a normalized relationship with Putin. We certainly do not need Germany or others to be buying gas from the Russians. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline should be shelved. This should not go forward. This is a clear indication that the Russian aggression is only going to get worse, and it can be sporadic, and it's uncontrolled. And so this is a lesson, I think, for the German chancellor and for her government to really look at this Nord Stream 2 pipeline and say, I don't think that we should give the Russians more influence over the energy in Germany or in Europe.
I mean, that's very interesting. And, you know, these two individuals, MBS and Putin, are on opposite sides when you look at the situation in Yemen, for example. And yet, perhaps the shunning of both of them is driving them closer together.
You know, that may be true in the G20 setting, but they're very different countries with very different relationships with not only the U.S., but really every European country. I think that when they come together at the G20 and there's this club, they both feel the pressure of the international community and the eyes are on them. And so there was this kind of camaraderie between them, as disturbing as it may be.
All right, let's take a look at another moment. This is Emmanuel Macron of France and Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. Let's watch.
President of the Republic of South Africa.
I mean, you know, it's a little tough to hear, but he's saying, Emmanuel Macron says, you know, I'm worried. And MBS says, you know, you shouldn't be worried. And Macron says, I'm a man of my word. And MBS's sort of way is that he's kind of smiling a little bit. Macron looks very serious. What's the dynamic behind that exchange?
You know, it's really hard to tell from the video and certainly from the audio. Let me just say that I think that the pressure is on the Saudis to come clean and to investigate and to prosecute the murder of Khashoggi. It's obviously extremely troubling to the international community and to everyone who is watching. But we need to make sure that we have partners where we can. I like the president's approach of dual tracks when it comes to countries like North Korea or Iran or Russia. These dual tracks where we're very tough, we have sanctions, we make our positions very clear. But President Trump is also sending another message, which is, I'm willing to talk and I'm willing to sit down with people who will change their behavior. We've seen it very successfully in North Korea so far. Look, there's a long way to go. I get it. It's not a happy ending yet. But we are on a track where we have the sanctions, we're pressuring the North Koreans, and we're trying to get them to the table. They came to the table and made some promises. That is a step. I think the same situation is going on with Russia. We have the toughest sanctions on Russia. We've seen their activity, their malign activity, become worse over the last couple of years. And President Trump is sending a strong message. We want to talk to you, but the behavior has to change. I think we're sending the same same message with the Saudis.
One last question for you, Ambassador. Your name is on the list that's being discussed as a possible replacement for Nikki Haley as ambassador to the UN. Is that a position that you would be interested in coming home and taking?
You know, I'm going to give you the standard line, which is we serve at the pleasure of the president. But let me say one thing. It is a true pleasure to work for this president on foreign policy issues, because I think we are making so much progress. And so anyone who gets a chance to serve in any role, any national security role, is lucky to be a part of this team. And so, you know, I leave it to the president. He decides where people go.
All right, Rick Grinnell, thank you very much. Good to see you, Ambassador.
Good to see you, Martha. Thank you.
So coming up next, unbelievable new images showing the aftermath tonight of a massive 7.0 earthquake striking the Alaskan coast.
We felt the rumble come through. We knew exactly what it was. We ran outside, you know, the trucks shaking back and forth.
Briefly faced the threat of tsunami. Dan Springer live in our Northwest Bureau tonight with the story. Hi, Dan.
Yeah, hey, Martha, this was a major quake, even in a state used to strong and frequent earthquakes, and they're not even close to assessing all the damage. It happened at 8:30 in the morning and lasted for over a minute. The earthquake was centered in Point McKenzie, just about 5 miles north of downtown Anchorage, with its 280,000 residents. The damage is extensive and widespread. Roads buckled, water mains were snapped, power was knocked out to tens of thousands of people, although they are restoring a lot of that power tonight. A tsunami warning was issued, but later canceled. The airport was completely shut down, but it too has reopened to plane traffic. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline, which runs 800 miles from Prudhoe Bay to Valdez, has been shut down as a precaution. So far, no reports of any damage to that economic lifeline. Hospitals had water damage from broken lines, but they managed to stay open. And amazingly, there are no reports of a spike in serious injuries. But it was scary and dramatic. This video was recorded on the 6th floor of the courthouse in downtown Anchorage. You see people ducking for cover. There's a lot of damage reported at homes in the area, shattered glass, things falling off of walls. Wasilla's own Sarah Palin, the former governor from Alaska, and John McCain's running mate, of course, put out a social media post that her family is intact, but her house is not. That is the case with many Alaskans. They are feeling lucky to be alive, like Raven Maitland, who was driving in this truck in the dark when the earthquake started. He stopped and bailed out, and as he was doing this, the road he was on, which runs right along a frozen lake, collapsed.
The whole ground's opening up in front of you. It's like, is this time? Is this the day? And you kind of get out of the, I got out of the truck and I started running the other direction, trying to look and make sure that there was no other, places on the ground opening up.
The regional head of FEMA is on his way to Anchorage. The governor, Bill Walker, declared a state of disaster. President Trump says he is monitoring the situation and praying for those affected. The good news in all this, at this point, no reports of any deaths or even life-threatening injuries, but it's still early. The race is on, of course, to get power restored to thousands of Alaskans who are dealing with temperatures in the 20s. Martha?
Wow. Thank you very much. Dan Springer tonight in Alaska, on Alaska. So also breaking tonight, the woman at the center of Florida's controversial midterm recount now out of a job tonight, sooner than expected. Governor Rick Scott suspending Brenda Snipes before she could retire earlier. Scott saying in part, quote, after a series of inexcusable actions, it's clear that there needs to be an immediate change in Broward County, and taxpayers should no longer be burdened by paying a salary for a supervisor of elections who has already announced resignation. Chris Starwalt is our Fox News politics editor who joins us tonight. Chris, what's your reaction to this out of Florida tonight?
Spite is a thing. She, at the beginning of this whole process, she says, no, we're great. We do everything great. Even Democrats said Broward County has a hysterically terrible history when it comes to the governance of elections. So what are you talking about? And watching her sort of unraveling, this woman who was appointed in 2003, I believe, 2002 by Jeb Bush to replace her predecessor, who he removed for incompetency and misfeasance. So she had been there all this time. And then she was ready to say, I'm probably not going to run again. And then she was ready to say, actually, I think I'm going to quit in January. And Scott was not going to give her the privilege of leaving with her head up. he's going to send her home in humiliation.
Well, he got some grief for not removing her before all of this, given some of her prior records. So maybe he felt that that the time was now, and that it would be good for her to take an earlier leave. Chris, I want to get your quick thoughts on a couple other things. You know, I'm fascinated by the Hillary and Bill Clinton tour, which has now kicked off, and it kicked off in Canada. Apparently, about half of the arena was unsold, and the tickets, which were originally supposed to go for hundreds of dollars, they were, you know, selling to people for as cheap as $17 in some situations. But it didn't stop Hillary Clinton from still stoking the fire that she may run again. Watch this.
You're on a 13-city tour, the two of you, President Clinton, Madam Secretary. Now, is that because you guys just want to hang out together? Or is it because you're testing the waters for a run at being President of the United States?
Actually, Frank, I'm thinking about standing for Parliament here in Canada.
My favorite part is that Bill Clinton, like, you know, puts his hand on his head like, oh my gosh, it never occurred to me that anybody would ask us that question. That's not why we're here.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought that anything like that would ever be said? Look, I think The Onion may have had this one the best. The Onion headline was, Hillary Clinton says she'll either going to raise $100 million in donations or she threatens to run for president a third time. Democrats they used to be sick of her. They're scared of her. They're scared that she's actually going to run again. And I can't tell who she's trolling more, Republicans or Democrats. I think she's trolling Democrats harder.
We'll see. Michelle Obama's also out there on tour and doing quite well.
They like her.
Actually.
Yeah, they
Chris,
like her.
Thank you, Chris. Great to see you tonight.
You bet.
So coming up next, a vile threat made by a Democratic state representative in Illinois.
I would like to make him a broth of Legionella and pump it into the water system of his loved one.
Her Republican target of that threat coming up next to respond.
Fox News headlines 24/7 at Channel 115.
I mean, who does this? After an ugly scene on the floor of the Illinois State Legislature, Democratic State Representative Stephanie Kifowit, I think is how you say her name, decided to handle it this way by wishing this on her political opponent.
I would like to make him a broth of Legionella and pump it into the water system of his loved one so that they can be infected, they can be mistreated, they can sit and suffer by getting aspirin instead of being properly treated, and ultimately die.
Wow. Kifowit initially claimed that her words to GOP Representative Peter Breen were twisted and misrepresented. Hard to make that argument. She did later apologize. Here now, the target of Kifowit's attack, Republican Illinois State Representative Peter Breen. Peter, what on earth were you guys discussing that prompted that response?
Well, and we were discussing how to set the limit for the Court of Claims, so for lawsuits against the state. We had some veterans, some wonderful heroes of ours who were infected with Legionnaire's disease at that facility. So you've got a few dozen veterans, and some of them even died. So we wanted to get as much money to them as we could and quickly. But the bill in question was about the thousands of lawsuits against the state of Illinois. And so the matter was really where to set the dollar amount. And so when Representative Kifowit came out with this vile attack on me, it was really out of left field. I mean, we were really, do we set it at about $500,000? Do we set it at $2 million? That was really what the terms of the debate were.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a logical discussion, obviously, that you would have in the legislature. How did she make the argument that her words were twisted? I mean, I think everybody just heard her words come straight out of her mouth.
Well, and they were clearly prepared remarks. And there's the sort of thing, look, if someone on my side of the aisle, so I'm the Republican floor leader, if someone on my side of the aisle was doing that, started that speech, they wouldn't have finished it without me in their ear, getting them to apologize and retract those remarks immediately.
So was there any response from her colleagues saying, look, that's really over the line, or were people cheering her on? What was it like in there?
It was difficult. So I'm listening to this, and I'm just beside myself. And at the close of her comments, there was applause from some of her Democratic colleagues. And I'll tell you the response later that evening. I had one Democrat who, out of 67, who came and apologized to me. But even to this day, there has not been a single elected Democrat I know of in Illinois who has publicly condemned those remarks.
Well, someone on your side did. This is Jean Ives. Here's what she said.
How dare you concoct up some sort of story about brewing up some batch of Legionnaires and having him feed it to his family? How dare you take an honest debate about an issue and then wish death on my colleague Peter Breen, his wife, and his 2 adopted kids?
So I know you lost your election. What is next for you, sir?
Well, I'm going to go back to work. So I work as a constitutional attorney, so I will continue to do First Amendment, free speech, religious liberty work. I'm going to continue advocating for fiscal responsibility, small government, the sorts of things that was why I went into the Illinois General Assembly. Yep. So I'm going to keep that up.
All right, sir, thank you very much. You'll even stick up for her right for free speech, I would imagine, even though you find it inappropriate. Good to see you tonight. Many thanks. So a warning about the video that you're about to see. It is disturbing.
So a tree falls in your brain.
Chilling new details in the case of a Colorado husband and father who once pleaded with the public for the safe return of his pregnant wife and daughters, but who we now know, after this stunning video confession, is the cold-blooded murderer who killed them all. Trace Gallagher joins us live from our West Coast newsroom with the full story tonight. Trace.
And Martha, before we show you this new video released by the Weld County District Attorney's Office, it's important to know the context here. The video is from August 15th, 2 days after Shanann Watts and her daughters Bella and Celeste had been reported missing. At this point, Chris Watts had denied any involvement in their disappearance, telling investigators he wants his family back and insisting he does not know where they are. But he also failed a polygraph test. And when Chris Watts' father enters the room, Watts paints an entirely different picture, telling him he found Shanann choking his children, so he retaliated. Watch.
She heard him, yeah. And then I went out and I freaked out and I heard her. I freaked out.
Chris Watts then tells his father he doesn't want to admit to police that he knows where they are. Watch.
I freaked out and she had me. I would say that somebody went to do all the bodies off or something. I mean, I didn't know what else had been other than that.
Prosecutors say Watts strangled his wife for at least 2 minutes and then, despite what he told his father, suffocated his daughters. He then loaded the bodies into his truck and drove them to a work site where he buried his wife in a shallow grave and stuffed his daughters into oil tanks. According to court documents, the day he killed his family, he also called his daughter's school to tell them they weren't returning and contacted a realtor about selling his house. A co-worker of Watts later came forward to say they'd been having an affair. Chris Watts finally admitted killing his family and will serve 3 consecutive life sentences. Martha.
Incredible. Unbelievable. Trace, thank you very much. So next up, we brought you the story of Paradise High School and all of the students, including most of the football team, who lost the homes that they grew up in during the California fires. Tonight, a man who took Giving Tuesday to heart and gave $1 million.
He doesn't even know us, but he has it in his heart to give this money to us, to just help us. And it kind of makes my heart smile.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Once again, for about the 4th night and 4 nights in a row, there is just a lot going on in the news. Up ahead, we'll have details about new dangers lurking in the Central American migrant caravan, the one that's just across our southern border tonight in Tijuana. The caravan is not what they told you it was. We'll tell you what it actually is. And then the question of voter suppression. Voter suppression is a phrase you're hearing a lot lately from Democrats. Suddenly it seems like it's 1956 again. But is voter suppression actually happening in America? We have the numbers on that, the conclusive numbers. Plus, with Christmas upon us, the left is mounting an attack on, naturally, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. We'll tell you what they're saying about him. But first tonight, the big news. President Trump's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty in federal court today to lying to Congress. Cohen conceded that he was intentionally wrong. He lied about the dates of an abortive Moscow real estate deal when he testified to the Senate Intelligence Committee last year. Cohen's plea was, of course, big news on cable television. The president responded to it as well. He called Cohen, quote, weak and, quote, not a very smart person. Well, that's objectively true, of course. It's also worth asking why anyone would hire a weak, dumb lawyer. Someday we'll get to the bottom of that. But for now, let's consider what we have just learned about how Washington works. Apparently, it's now an enforceable felony to lie to the U.S. Congress. On one level, that is good news. We should take our own laws seriously. Functional countries do that. Nations in decline set up sanctuary cities and ignore their own borders. Nor is it implausible that Michael Cohen might have broken this law or really any other law. Nobody who knows him is shocked by the allegation. If Cohen was accused of running a cannibalism ring, you'd have to at least take the charge seriously. Anything is possible with that guy. So 3 cheers for law and order. The problem is, if you're going to enforce statutes, you have to enforce them fairly and evenly. The law has to apply to everyone. Otherwise, it's not really the law. It's a political weapon. Michael Cohen is facing 5 years in prison for telling Congress something that he knew was false. How often does that happen in Washington? If you watch C-SPAN, you know the answer. Constantly. All the time. There are almost never consequences, by the way. According to one study, between the Second World War and 2007, a total of only 6 people were convicted of lying to Congress. 6 people in 60 years. In other words, the law is not enforced, and that's why people break it so often. Watch this sworn testimony from 2013. This is not someone you haven't heard of. This is the then Director of National Intelligence, Jim Clapper, assuring the Congress under oath that the NSA absolutely does not spy on American citizens.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
Yeah. Clapper lied. He's a liar. There's no debate about that. And yet he wasn't charged for lying under oath. In fact, Clapper got richer after he retired. CNN hired him as an analyst. Pretty much the same thing happened to Jim Comey, the former FBI director. In 2017, Comey claimed, again under oath, that he had never been an anonymous source for news stories while he worked at the FBI. Watch him tell that lie to the Congress.
Director Comey, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
Never.
Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
No.
Yeah, well, according to Comey's longtime deputy who would know, and that would be former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, what Comey said on the tape you just saw is totally untrue. So Comey lied to Congress. But nobody cared. Jim Comey went on to get rich as a pundit selling his book. The same people rooting for Michael Cohen's destruction for lying consider Jim Comey a hero. And then there's former CIA Director John Brennan. Brennan lies constantly. That's well documented. In 2011, for example, Brennan claimed that drone strikes overseas had never, to his knowledge, killed a single non-combatant. That was a total crock. In 2014, Brennan lied and said the CIA had not broken into the computers of Senate staffers. And then last year, under oath before Congress, Brennan said this.
Do you know if the Bureau ever relied on the Steele dossier as part of any court filings, applications, petitions, pleadings?
I have no awareness.
Did the CIA rely on it?
No. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done.
Yeah, that's a total lie, a flagrant lie, and a significant one about something that affects the life of this country. And yet, you know how the story ends? Brennan was never charged with a felony for lying to the Congress. In fact, just the opposite. Washington rewarded him. Brennan is now an analyst for NBC News. He could be on the air tonight telling you why it's so vitally important that Michael Cohen was charged with lying to Congress, because we really can't have that. Rule of law, blah, 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 blah. Do you notice a theme here that connects all of these stories? Yes, there is one, and it's simple. The well-connected can do pretty much whatever they want. They can lie to the Congress with impunity, and they do. They can lobby for foreign governments without bothering to register, and they do. If they're rich enough, they can even, I don't know, molest children without being seriously punished. Ask Jeffrey Epstein. He did that. None of this, by the way, is a defense of Michael Cohen. That guy's a creep. He may very well wind up in jail. But if Cohen does wind up in jail, let's hope he's just the first in a long series of prosecutions. If the law is applied to Michael Cohen, then it has to be applied to people who have lied about things that actually matter. Jack Abramoff knows a lot about Washington. He's been here a long time. He's a former lobbyist, and he joins us tonight. Jack Abramoff, you've seen both sides of this. You've been in a position similar to the one Michael Cohen is now, charged with a crime under the lights, and you've also operated freely in Washington. Do you think that I'm overstating the case? Is the law evenly applied in this city?
No, it doesn't seem to be evenly applied or anything close to evenly applied. And I think that this is one of the things that upsets the American people. Everywhere I go when I speak, people now, instead of ranting against corruption as they normally do, they've identified this as really one of the big problems that you have on the left. A series of people, the list is actually too long even to recite on the air, who have seemingly committed unbelievable crimes, the Clinton Foundation, et cetera. And instead of being punished or prosecuted or indicted, they're running for Congress, like Donna Shalala and others. And so I think that it seems certainly that the justice system in America, even under Republican presidents, is geared to go after people on the right and to ignore people on the left. Again, that's not to excuse Michael Cohen. I don't know what his deeds are, and we'll see what they are. But it seems that people on the left who are doing far worse than that, nobody says a thing about them.
It also seems like the slowest gazelle gets eaten. I mean, Michael Cohen is dumb, if I can just say, someone who knows him, and not personally popular, and obviously he's attached to a very unpopular presidential campaign and a very unpopular candidate. And so he seems like a very natural target, whereas someone like Jim Clapper, who's seen as this wise man, this chin-tugging graybeard, can lie about something deeply significant, about breaking the law. The NSA is not allowed to spy on Americans. And he gets a TV contract. I mean, can you think of, in your many years here, decades here, an example of someone's really powerful being punished for breaking the law?
No, I can't. I can't think of certainly since Watergate, and even the people who were punished in Watergate really weren't very powerful people. Right, exactly. No, and I think that the problem for Michael Cohen is he's a gazelle running in the wrong pack.
Right.
If you're running in the left-wing pack, no matter where he is in that pack, because there aren't exactly brilliant gazelles in that pack either.
Exactly.
But that's a more of a protected pack, it seems, for some reason.
Huh. So that's not, and I just want to be totally clear for the fifth time, I'm not defending whatever crime Michael Cohen is accused of committing, and it sounds like he admitted it, okay? He should be punished. But it does seem like that's corrupt. That's not justice when a law is only applied selectively.
Well, it's corrupt and it's corrosive of the view of our system among the American people. There are a lot of people, even people on the left, I've talked to, who say, it doesn't seem like things are really being fairly applied, particularly the Epstein situation, which is absolutely abhorrent.
Yes.
Here's somebody who is molesting children, it seems, and facilitating the molestation of children by other powerful people, and they cut him a deal for 13 months in a county jail, I guess, where he got to leave the jail 6 days a week. Wow. I mean, somebody.
But they confiscated his address book, I notice. And it's online, and you can look at it, and it's fascinating. And a lot of people you and I know personally are in that address book. I don't think any one of them has ever been charged with anything, even though prosecutors knew exactly who he was hanging out with.
Well, from what they say, the deal that he signed actually protected any potential co-conspirators, which is also astonishing. How do you sign a deal like that? I know plenty of people I was in prison with who would love to have had a deal like that.
That's exactly right. If only you'd benefited from that. Jack Abramoff, thank you.
Thanks.
An honest man who's been around. Jerome Corsi appeared on this program just the other night to describe what he believes are Robert Mueller's efforts to entrap him.
And the special prosecutors blow you up. They do this, what I call perjury trap. It's really, you know, they ask you a question. They have material they won't show you. You've forgotten about it. They say, you just lied because this email you forgot about in 2016 proves your current memory is wrong. I mean, it's a memory test.
It's disgusting.
And then they accuse you of lying. It's completely rigged, and it's politically driven by Clinton operatives who have an agenda.
Now, of course, he says he's asked his attorney to draft a criminal complaint of his own to bring against Mueller for misconduct. How do we assess all of this? Elizabeth Price-Foley is a constitutional law professor at Florida International University College of Law, and she joins us tonight. Elizabeth, thank you very much for coming on. If we take 3 steps back, I'm a little bit surprised that this late in the process, we're still talking about Michael Cohen pleading to lying about the date of a perfectly legal real estate transaction that didn't even come to fruition, and Jerome Corsi at 72. This doesn't seem significant. It seems penny ante, and it doesn't seem related to Russian collusion. What is this telling us?
Well, it's telling us how desperate Mueller and his team has become. You know, after almost 2 years